Right, good afternoon, everybody. In advertising, we're all about reaching new audiences. And one of the audiences that I feel passionate about is that of people with learning disabilities. Growing up as a child, I had a wonderful friend who struggled to read certain materials. He found it very difficult to consume that information, and that's why this project is particularly close to my heart. Who here knows somebody with similar learning challenges? I'm sure some of you do. Did you know that about 200 million people worldwide experience similar difficulties, especially when reading literature? Now, I'm happy to be here today, partnered with Dentsu, after the solution we've built called Easy Reading. We're going to talk you through the journey that it took to build this solution. My name is Jeremy Bartoszewicz. I'm a solutions architect at AWS. And with me here today is Tiago Winkler, Head of Innovation at Dentsu Creative Brazil, and he'll take you through the first section of our journey. Tiago, take it away.
Thank you, Jeremy. Say hello. So I'm Tiago. I'm from Brazil, and I'm from Dentsu. So I'm here, very excited to talk about the project that we developed together, right? So just to give you guys a spoiler of what about we are about to talk. So I will just give you a real quick context on what is Dentsu and what I'm doing here, and why I decided to come and present you guys something that we call AI for good, right? So we've been working with AI for quite a long time, and but this is focused on the good part of the AI, right? So making a better world. Also be covering the project itself. What is the Easy Reading project that we'll be talking about, and talking about from where it came, right? So the Visit Portugal client. But the key thing here is really to provide you guys insights on how we did this, and helping you guys maybe to navigate this and do it by yourself, right? But we'll be talking about the experience itself, and showing how we did this from zero to hero in 3 months, right? Also, Jeremy will be talking more on details about what happened behind the scenes, like under the hood, really, how we utilize a partnership with AWS, all the integration, how it makes our lives easier and faster, and then we'll be discuss a little bit about what will be the next steps for this one. Cool. Talking about Dentsu, right? So Dentsu is a ancient Japanese group, right? So it's 123 years already. So we have a lot of people across a lot of different countries, and it's a group, right? So we may recognize one of those or more than these brands, right? So we have a lot of agencies, and we do work with very key and huge clients, right? So this is what we do, pretty much. Go forward. Going deeper a little more on the innovation side of things. So it's not just we decided to do a cool project using AI. We are structured in a way that we have more than 100 innovation engineers spread across different regions, right? So I'm heading the operation in Brazil, but we have in India and a lot of other places, and then we get together to work for Dentsu and support like a lot of initiatives, like bringing ideas for pitches, and really help Dentsu on bring more value to the clients. And we are also having this group doing like funny prototypes, and not exactly focused on clients, but really fun for us to learn how it works and what it can do and what it cannot do. And then we evaluate more than 30 different platforms along this last 2 years, right? So we are constantly putting effort and energy on doing this. Just mentioning real quick about some cases that we have, what we already did. In the past, we were more focused on AR and VR, like this case in the bottom that on AR, like we developed art museum for street art that you need to go to a specific position on GPS to see the art and interact with the art. And but then AI came and then start playing around with this AI. One good example is we developed for a noodle company that was playing around with the fact that everyone has their own recipe of noodles. We developed an app that's really fun that take a picture of your recipe of your dish and then generate art based on what you put on your plate, right? So you build your art with your plate, And then we utilize generative AI to do this. It was a really successful campaign in Brazil and helps a lot with the client on sales. And one of the things that I'm really proud of is on the top right one, is calling scrolling therapy. We developed this app last year to support in going more on the AI for good, right? So we developed this app to help Parkinson's patients to do facial exercises, right? So it's a very boring stuff that they need to do, but is required to them to keep up with keep their faces muscles active. We developed an app for Android and iOS for free that was utilized in the time navigating on social media to do this exercise, right? So then you can navigate on Instagram and Facebook through this app. And then, for example, if you want to scroll up, you need to blink, for example. If you would like to like some posts, you need to smile. You know, you can do a lot of different variations of this facial expressions using AI to navigate this and then facilitate or make this more enjoyable, you know. So just a little of things that we'll do. But talking more directly about Gen AI, it's not new, right? But Gen AI is something that is really hot. It's been adopted very quickly. This is a very simple graphic of the first 4 years of engagement, right? So how many users engaged with this in comparison with smartphones, for example, and tablets. So Gen AI is really going crazy. And we are seeing more and more utilizations for that. And now we'll be talking more about the good part of that, what it can do for good. So what it can do for using Gen AI for good, right? So I mentioned already the scrolling therapy project I did, but this one here is a really interesting one, and I'll go deeper on that. Jeremy already provided a spoiler, right? So 200 million people has some kind of some level of intellectual disability, like even having difficulties to focus or difficulties to understand, right? And then it represents a lot of people, right? So Brazil, we have São Paulo is a huge country, London is another huge country. If you combine both populations, we need to multiply by 10 to have the number of people that are affected by this, right? So it's huge, and there's a lot of people, and we need to do something to help, and this is what the idea came, right? So there's something called easy to read standard, right? So it was created in 2010, and it's pretty much just a set of rules that will guide or suggest how a text should be written to be more accessible, right? So not only the content itself, but how the images are presented, how simple the image should be, and also the layout, right? So the font and all the way that you are displaying this, right? It's a really nice one, but the problem with this is that it's very lengthy and painful and expensive process, right? Because it takes time, it takes a lot of time and energy of experts doing this, and really is not helping fast enough, I would say, to really bring more books on this format to the population that will be able to take advantage of that, right? Just to give you some numbers, usually it takes like 10 people for 4 weeks working, focused, to have a book translated to this pattern, let's call it this way. And right now we have 30,000 books on Amazon already that are on this format. But just on the British Library we have 14 million books, right? So it's really the percentage of this is really low. And then the idea was to tackle this one. Here's a quote from Visit Portugal, president of tourism. Visit Portugal approached us because they wanted to explore new ways of tourism, right? And they wanted to bring this via literature, right? They wanted to have their classic books like converted and available for everyone to take a look, understand, and enjoy, right? And then they approached us to see what it can do. And then it came via Dentsu Iberia, our friends from Spain, right? So it was really a global collaboration. They reached us out for us to work on that. And I would like to show you a quick video about this that was produced by our friends from Spain, and then we can go from there.
Visit Portugal presents Easy Reading, the first accessible intelligence that allows people with intellectual disabilities to travel through the power of reading.
Portugal, a country open to all, one of the first to sign the Convention on the Rights of People with Intellectual Disabilities. A country that found in books an amazing way to travel when borders were closed, now takes a step further, opening its literary richness to up to 200 million people around the world by translating books into an easy-to-read format. In a matter of hours, easy reading, powered by AI, synthesizes the original text, replaces complex words, makes the sentences shorter, and adds illustrations to provide context. The tool is developed according to the European standards for easy-to-read content. Also, experts will perform a final review once the book is completed.
Until now, adapting a book into an easy-to-read format was a slow, complicated process that took weeks of work and thousands of euros to complete.
People from all around the world are already travelling through the pages of those novels, and Portugal is just the beginning.
Com o envolvimento neste projeto, inclusivo e inovador, o turismo em Portugal reforça o seu compromisso.
Ajudar a que a literatura chegue a todos.
The whole world is talking about easy reading and how this technology has the potential to leave a mark and change society for the better. Portugal is writing a new chapter in the Book of Equality.
And everyone will be able to read it.
Pretty intense, huh? And so how does it work, right? So pretty much we developed a platform where can upload the book, and then the book start being evaluated by our platform. So start working on the content simplification, so having long sentences and trying to understand the meaning and compress and do like things more direct to the point. Also identify some keywords to help us on generating the images that will be nice to have there. And then after that, we'll be generating a book or a draft of a book on a specific format that is also following the same standards suggested, right? And we keep the expert review person in the process, right? So it's not only delegating 100% to the AI, but is really doing the hard lifting and then inviting the expert just to review, right? Take a look, do some adjustments, and fix anything that maybe the AI didn't get right? So after that, then the idea is to have the expert confirming that it should be fine to release, and then to be available to the final user or whatever they want to do, right? So I'll be talking, actually Jeremy will be talking about all the technical stuff and how it's making this using AWS and how it facilitates our life. But yeah, this is pretty much the recording of the screen of the portal, right, the tool. You can see on the left the original book, right, the original page that was processed, and what was generated in the right. So you see short sentences, some explanations of some keywords there, some more simplistic but useful images, like to give the context of what's going on there. And then here I'd like to mention how we approached that, but with the intention of give you guys insights on how these kind of things work and lessons learned along the way, right? So we are bragging about doing this in 3 months, right? But it's not exactly because the idea came in January and we delivered, yes, in April. But as I mentioned before, right? So we are constantly playing around with all different technologies and stuff to be up to date on what can be done and what cannot be done, right? So we already evaluated AWS services back in September last year, and then we had a partnership there. We did like some funny internal prototypes, right? Just to understand how it was able to do. And then when our friends from Spain reached us out in January, we were able to hit the ground running because we already know how it operates, right? And then we spent like January doing the first prototype, like showing what AI can do or cannot do, and how good you can understand the book and translate, to show like a very rough version of that. And then in February we start working on a really more polished interface and more really having a minimal livable product level. And then in the end of March through April, we work on really consolidating all the user flow and make things beautiful and more friendly, right? And so yeah, and then we launched and is available since April to Visit Portugal. And then now I'd like to invite my friend to keep talking about the funny stuff behind the hood, under the hood, right? So Jeremy, it's you.
Thank you, Tiago. So, how did AWS and Dentsu partner to build this solution in 3 months? As Tiago mentioned, hitting the ground running was key. And way in advance of the project, we did some hackathons, we did some upskilling, we ran some labs, we got the team used to the AWS services, how they work, and what features they might be using to build these types of projects. We helped with the initial proof of concept, proving out whether it's possible to even convert books using generative AI in a safe way in the first place. Once that was done, we worked together to refine the output that was being produced. We called on some of our specialist expertise in the generative AI space to help advise on how we should tune and tweak certain models. Once that was done, we had a candidate that was suitable for our audience. We wanted to make sure that the content was as good as it could be for the target we were serving. With enterprise support in place, we were able to put this into production and carry on bringing it to the rest of the world. One of the key services that was used to build this solution was Amazon Bedrock. It's a great service where behind one API, you've got many different generative AI models available. It's as simple as choosing a model, sending it some data, and getting a response back. Of course, there's extra features where you can customize models, you can do a whole host of things. As you can see, there are many model providers and many models available via Bedrock. Now, if you think about a book, there's a few different things you need to do. You have images you need to generate, you have text you need to rewrite, you have layouts that you need to tweak. And this is where this breadth of availability really helped us build something very quickly in partnership. And here you can see some of the models we ended up settling on. We looked at Amazon Titan's image generator and Stability's stable diffusion for generating images for these converted books. We looked at Anthropic's Claude family of models to actually pre-process but also rewrite some of the text. So the question is, what did that process look like? Round one, we basically took a chapter from a book and said, let's pass that into a model with a task, asking it to generate an easy to read equivalent. And that was interesting because should these models know what an easy to read format is? Turns out that they did, and that was a good head start. Having said that, the quality of the output was not great. There are lots of rules that need to be followed in easy-to-read formats. Think shorter sentences, spaced out paragraphs, highlighted topics, keywords explained. You can imagine how if it's already not working amazingly well on a single chapter, how's it going to process a whole book? So that takes us to our second stage. We thought, how can we actually improve the quality of the output? How can we make sure that the output's following the rules that we need it to? So we took that rule set and we broke it down into multiple rule sets. We took that chapter and we ran that chapter with the first rule set through the model, giving it less to focus on. The rules were followed really well. So we said, why not take that output, take the second rule set and run it through again, and then keep on running through until all of our rule sets are applied and we have a candidate draft available. So now that we have a candidate draft, what's next? How do we do the whole book? If you look at the way ebooks are written or produced as an EPUB format, they're designed for easy reader or reading devices. The format is such that it splits on page. So when you press a button, the page turns over. That's not necessarily how a book is arranged. What we're after here is we're after distinct chapters that we can rewrite. We want to be able to inspect the linkage between the chapters rather than having this format which is aligned to how it might be seen on a reading unit. So, we took that EPUB file, again, sent it to the model, got the model to actually do some pre-processing and generate our well-defined chapters and well-defined segments. We then actually took a combined rule set with each chapter and sent it through this orchestration engine that was built on top of AWS step functions, and that was able to then process the whole book bit by bit. At the end, with all our rewritten segments, we used another model to reassemble the book as well. Now, some of you may have noticed that we've combined the rule set. We were able to do that because of advances in the capabilities and model versions that were available at the time. In 3 months, we had gone through 3 major models being released onto the market. We started with Claude 2.1, we ended with Claude 3.5 in 2 variants. And this was another learning that using the right model for the right job was key to optimizing this from the start. We used Claude's haiku model to actually do the splitting of the book. It did that really, really fast, which was nice. That meant we could then run all the segments in parallel through Claude's sonnet model, which is a larger model and more capable at creative writing. So you can see how we use that model to get the best quality output whilst balancing the time it might take to produce the overall draft. We then used haiku to reassemble the book, and we had our output. Happy days. So what was next? How do we know we're following the easy to read rules throughout the segment? We want to double check, right? We need to mark our own homework. So what we did, we said, well, let's just ask the model again. Let's take this draft, send it back through, send the rules in again, and actually ask which rules are being followed, which ones aren't being followed, and whether we can get a statement of which changes need to be made. Interestingly enough, sometimes there were rules that weren't followed, so this let us reiterate the draft quite quickly and integrate those changes. What this is now allowing us to do, looking forward, is to actually create drafts for different disability types. Now that we've got a way of managing rules, managing drafts, iterating over different rule sets and marking our own homework, we can now produce different types of formats too. With that final draft, that gets sent over to an easy-to-read specialist. That easy-to-read specialist is there to make sure that that content type is suitable to the reader it's intended for. Once that's clear, it's sent to a production team who does a final check, reassembles it all as an EPUB, and sends it out into the world to be enjoyed by many more people. What about images? What do we do with those, right? So we've now got all the text processed. Where do we place those images? What do we do then? If you look at a book, illustrating is not as simple as it may initially seem. There's lots of questions. What do we illustrate? Where do we place those illustrations? Are the images safe? Is the content safe for people to consume? And are the styles suitable for the type of audience that we've got reading these books? So what did we do? Well, we did what we did before. We asked the model again to actually give us a bit of an opinion on where images should go, what the key topics in each chapter were, what images might be suitable and which styles align to certain audience types. And we did that for each chapter and for each section. Once we had that information, we were then able to actually generate a description of an image, which could then be passed to an image model, such as our own Titan image generator model and Stabilities XL 1.0 model. You can imagine we're flipping through a good 4 or 5 models here. So actually having them all behind one API, sitting behind Bedrock, made development quick, it made code clean, and it made it really easy to just switch the model based on the task we're trying to do. Once those images were generated, we could set them in the text, and again, send the draft back to the editors. So, we do have some key takeaways in these various sections whilst we've been working through this solution, which we'd like to share with you today. One of the first ones is generative AI at the moment is a fast-moving space. We've got 3 major models that we've gone through within 3 months. That's 1 a month. That's a lot of retesting. Having a way to be able to quickly flip back and forth, having a test harness around these models, it all makes putting these things into production a lot easier. Having different model sizes with different capabilities allows us to process different amounts of text. If you think about a chapter versus a whole book, there's this thing called a context size that a model is able to have as an input into the request you ask it. Where you're placing a whole book into a context window, it might not fit, so you won't be able to process the whole book. So having different models with different context sizes was key to making sure we're able to process the segments in the right way. Which came to our next learning. Don't be shy. Ask the model for things. Ask it to do tasks you may not expect them to be able to do, such as rate this chapter against this rule set. You could easily also apply different model types to rate and rank versus process and rewrite. And we're seeing lots of patterns using mixtures of models, mixtures of experts to get a good quorum and a good quality of output. In this case, we have our easy to read specialists, also our final editors who are able to check the content. So we were less worried about playing different models off against each other to make sure that the content's suitable in that way. Coming back to using the best model for the job, we used Haiku for that pre-processing, Sonnet for the rewrite. If you think about the statistic that Tiago shared earlier on in the presentation, there's 30,000 easy-to-read formatted books on Amazon.com. But there's 14 million books in the British Library. When you start scaling to a large count, it really makes a difference at scale that you've already pre-optimized the solution before you run a whole host of data through it, which means we're already optimized for cost from the get-go. The models are typically metered by some fee per an amount of tokens, and then different model sizes have different pricing options depending on the amount of tokens that they process. So actually using at scale smaller models for simpler tasks nets a really massive cost benefit in the overall solution cost. So start small, use the smaller models. If they work, great. If they don't, use one of the more capable models. See where you go. But be ready to iterate quick. And that's the key takeaway there. If we look at the image models that we used, again, just like you have different text models with different capabilities they're optimized for, likewise, with image models, each one has different things they're best at. Titan Image Generator was very good, as you can see here, at generating variations. We've got more or less the same description, but 3 different images. Being able to do this allowed the editors to actually choose from multiple options to make sure that the final output can be as high a quality as possible. It allows for customization. So if we were to have to tune the model for a particular style, we can do that behind Bedrock without too much development overhead. On the flip side, Titan Image doesn't generate images for sensitive topics. This is where using another model made sense. Let's pair the two. Let's play into their strengths, right? You can imagine some history books or some travel guides, they may talk about, war scenes on very old squares and elaborate cities. So generating those kinds of images with some models is a bit more tricky. Actually, an interesting trick there is to maybe generate an image of a type with one model and then potentially try generate variations using another. So there's different interplays you can try to get the final content type you need. One of the most important learnings here was the human and AI collaboration element. Having the rights holder as part of the process for requesting this reformat of content meant that there was implicit permission on the outputs that were generated. Having that rights holder review the output as well was very important in making sure that there's no issue on top of the generated content from the perspective of the original creator. So bringing the rights holder along the journey was key to success there. Having that easy to read specialist, as you can imagine, made sure that that content was suitable, it was correct. Different learning disabilities need slightly different nuanced types of content, which can be hard to differentiate, but a specialist will be able to pick that out straight away, like a needle in a haystack. And finally, that last editorial step was key to making sure, as a last quality gate, that there really is nothing offensive in the material that we're publishing out. Many rely on their reputation when they publish content, and that's something here, from a content safety perspective, that's key. So, some of the impact we've made with the solution. An average book contains approximately 60,000 words. The cost to convert 5,000 words, including images generated and insets, was about $2.50, which isn't bad. Which meant the overall cost of conversion for that book came to about $30. Now, if you think about it, back to that stat of 14 million books in the British Library, even if there's a $5 increase in cost, processing large amounts of content, it scales out to a massive cost differential. So keeping those costs trimmed was really key to making sure this would scale to hopefully serve a whole lot more people. After all, we've got 200 million people we're trying to serve here with this solution ultimately. Another learning, Thiago mentioned it took 4 weeks in general to convert one of these books into an easy to read format. Here, the process executed over a large book, over multiple chapters, takes about a day, which isn't too bad. 6 days are then used to actually check the content, tweak it, reiterate, send the drafts back through the process again. So we're able to bring 4 weeks back down to 1 week, which means our easy to read specialists have a lot more content they can be working with and making available for everyone to consume. So what's next for the easy reading platform for the future? We're going to look to pair to support multiple formats, different content types. I'm sure many of you here today listen to audiobooks or podcasts. We've got services like Polly that do text-to-speech. There's models like Meta's Music Gen Large model, which is able to generate audio. Wouldn't it be nice to generate different formats for different disability types? So that's another thing that we're looking into with the team. The way that generative AI models are changing is very fast. So we'd imagine that some of these models might be available in the next few months at a good enough quality to be able to generate other content types. And lastly, we're also looking at changing the orchestration engine that's used within this solution. So AWS Step Functions is a wonderful service for orchestrating workflows, but we also have a service called Bedrock Flows, where you're able to create generative AI specific workflows. And what we've been doing with the team that built this solution is actually rebuilding the whole orchestration component using Bedrock Flows, which you can see an example of here. The service went into general availability last Friday, and as you can see here, you can very easily, using a UI, craft a workflow, which means if you have less technical people who are able to understand some of these processes, you can have them have a go at implementing similar workflows to actually refactor content types, respond on various user journeys. There's a whole host of things you can do. And there's a couple of projects we have up our sleeve that we're looking at using this service too. So I highly recommend you all go and try it if it's of interest. I'll leave you with one last thought. And in the words of Atul, our General Manager of Bedrock at AWS, where innovation knows no limits, the dreams of today become realities of tomorrow. If you had asked me a year ago whether I could be using AI to convert books, to help my friends, to be able to read more, to stay more focused, I wouldn't have said that was possible, but here we are. And I challenge each and every one of you to bring some of your use cases to us. Try this out for yourself. It's not only books that need converting, there's lots of different content types that need to be generated. In the UK, the government requires that certain info sheets are generated in certain formats. So there's a lot of use for this kind of solution, which I'd expect to see in various different industries. With that said, thank you, Tiago, for your partnership. Thank you all for being here. And thank you to the Dentsu team for the collaboration in building Easy to Read. We have a session survey available via the mobile app. Please fill it in, and myself and Tiago will be available outside to take questions so we don't interrupt some of the other sessions here today. Thank you very much.